All right, so I've watched a few of y'all's YouTube channels. For those of you who have no idea who I am, my name is Tim, and basically I'm making this video for some of my friends. Of course, there are those who may still be interested in watching it anyways. And basically, all I'm going to do is talk about some stuff that hopefully will answer a few questions and realize certain realities about me. And so it's something where, first of all, there are some who wonder about like the girls that I send videos to in Snapchat. Am I friends with all of them? How close am I with all of them and stuff like that? There's a few of them that I was friends with years ago. Haven't really talked to them all that much since, just little Snapchat stuff now and then. Some of them I actually had no idea who they were until I started doing some of the stuff that I'm doing now. Some of them, like everybody knows who they are, right? And it's just something where I guess I was blessed enough to actually have them accept me for what it is that I do. Some of them have been really cool. Are we close friends? No, but they're really cool, and I like them anyways, and they seem to like me. Um, and so it's something where basically part of the reason that I started doing some of the stuff I've done with Snapchat is uh, that I'm an artist, and it's something where if you realize what I've done with my entire life and different friends that I've had and different places that I've lived, because I've lived in Washington, I've lived in California, I've lived in New York, and now I live in Kansas. And because of that, it's created quite an interesting mix of uh, perceptions, because different ones have different perceptions depending on where they're at and what they've heard. And so it's something where, I'm glad that there are those who recognize what I do for what it is. Um, and that, there are some who, I guess they can't comprehend certain differences, like between fantasy and reality. That there's some stuff that is total fantasy. It's something that we just do for fun. It's something that a lot of it really isn't anybody else's business. And I thought it was funny that some of the stuff I was doing with certain girls in particular kind of got out to different ones who, I guess they took it the wrong way or something like that. And it's somewhere basically my answer to those different ones who want to say something about it is it ain't your business anyways. Like you should just mind your own business and realize that if there really was a problem, that the girls that I'm actually doing what I'm doing with, and stuff would probably tell me personally because they know that I ain't gonna do something to hurt them, and it's a lot of it is just about having fun and being able to express oneself, and it's in some senses a commentary on entertainment, TV. It's perceptions of others, and it's something that some different ones can't seem to comprehend. Now you have to realize a lot of it is real. It isn't like it's all made up. You have to, it's like I tell the truth with what I say, but I'm also trying to help different ones learn because it seems as if part of the problem is that there are those who can't seem to deal with reality, and that they listen to what's said on TV, in the news, newspapers, gossip, and a lot of it has nothing to do with reality at all. And it makes for interesting conversation when you actually start looking at certain facts. It's kind of almost like the idea of trying to put different ones into groups and saying that, well, You play sports, so you're a jock, and all jocks are the same, and that's putting someone into a classification, into a group, and telling them what it is that they do, even though there are those who play different sports. So one person might play football, another person might be a swimmer. One person might play basketball, another might play hockey. They're different sports requiring different skills. And even on each team, realizing that each person playing a different position has a different job they're supposed to do. So when you realize, like for example with football, when you realize there's the quarterback, right? And the quarterback is supposed to throw the ball to someone, a receiver, right? Or hand the ball off to someone, right? So that they can try and score. There are also blockers, right? So quarterbacks, receivers, blockers. Just looking at it like that, you have to realize even there's three different categories, right? But then even amongst those, there's various positions that are played and what their job actually is. So when you start breaking it down and start realizing even within like a football team, there's differences. Then if you look at each person that's playing those games, do you realize that some of them play video games and some don't? Some like to, go to the theater and watch various productions, Hamilton, Les Mis, different stuff like that. When you realize that some of them enjoy that stuff, some don't. Some of them, like to party. Some don't. It's really interesting when you realize that once you start looking at each individual, if you just group them all together and said, well, you're a jock, so therefore you're whatever it is, you lose sight of the bigger picture. And that's what I noticed with different ones. It's like when you realize it's kind of like divergent, if you think about it, in essence. The different ones are like, well, you're this group, you're that group. Even with personalities, they have personality tests, and I don't know how many of you have ever had those personality tests. And basically, what is it that happens, right? It's like, choose what color you like. But maybe it doesn't have the color that you like. If it says, do you like brown, orange, or yellow? And if you like the color blue, then you'd be going, well, the color I like isn't one of those three choices. And if they're like, well, just choose the one that's closest to it. Which one of those colors is the closest to blue? Which color is the closest to blue if the color choices are brown, orange, and yellow? Would you say brown? Because I guess kind of sort of blue is used to make brown in some cases. And yellow's a primary color, and yellow and red make orange, so I guess brown? But then maybe that doesn't actually answer the question that's needed. Why? Because it wasn't really your favorite color. And then to think that just because you like a certain color, it automatically means that you have a certain personality type. It's kind of ridiculous, don't you think? Because just like with those football players, realizing to say that, well, if you like blue, then that means blah, 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 doesn't necessarily hold true. Some of it is stuff that, it's almost like brainwashing, getting different ones to believe something. And so and generalized statements is something else too, where you can basically say that everyone has certain kinds of stuff where it's like you can put any category you want, and in essence it's like you're creative, you enjoy doing stuff, you like going places, and somebody's like, that's just like me. It's like almost everyone, or at least what they like to think about themselves. So it's kind of interesting when you start realizing the reality. What if they actually asked you personally, tell me about yourself. What kind of person are you? What do you enjoy? And when you realize that, there's different kinds of ideas that certain ones have, where it's like, like I said, that's part of what racism is too. When you realize racism is one of those, putting someone into a category. And when you realize that the way that happens is they're like, well, if they're black, then they like chicken. If they're black, they like watermelon. If they're Mexican, they like tacos and burritos. If they're Chinese, they like rice. And then when you realize that's the beginnings of racism. What if you asked them what kind of food they like? What if they were born in America? And what if they were like Asian and the food they grew up with was chicken and watermelon? And that's what they liked. Maybe they don't even like rice. Would you assume just because they were Asian that all of their meals consisted of rice? What if they were adopted? What food might they eat if they were adopted from a family of a different race? So when you realize that there's different stuff, different ones can have a certain thought, a perception, an idea, does it make it true? And that's part of what I'm trying to prove with what I'm doing with Snapchat. Certain ideas that were out there, certain perceptions that were false. They weren't true. There's no basis in reality. And what's funny too is when you realize, the term basis. There are some who would want to translate that. And that's something else that's interesting too. You ever notice how different ones sometimes want to translate stuff that different ones are saying, even if it doesn't need translating? That someone can make a statement and it just means normal English, right? Just whatever it is that someone's saying. And someone else will look at it almost like slang, street talk, double talk, as if it has an alternative meaning. If somebody went out and was like, I was cutting trees the other day, what's funny is when you realize how many different ways that could be translated, whether it has to do with sex or drugs. What if they were just cutting down some trees because they were a logger? Somebody said, I got a dime. How many ways could you translate that? Possibly you might think, well, they got 10 years in prison. You might think, well, they got, $10 worth of drugs. You might say that, well, if they got a dime, they got a hot girl. Say if they got a dime, they have a small coin worth 10 cents. And there's tons of other translations of the word dime. So when you think about that, how many different words have tons of different translations? If all you heard was, I got a dime, wouldn't it be a good idea to ask, well, what do you mean you got a dime? Before you made any assumptions. Because if you translate it and you went to somebody and you were like, hey, guess what? They got $10 worth of drugs, and maybe the person was going, I got a dime. Really? Yeah, you should see my girl, man. She's hot. And then when you realize they translated it wrong. And there are some where it's like, they're like, you should see my girl. And they'd be like, oh, he wants them to fuck her ass. That isn't what I was saying. I just said, my girl's hot. You should look, if you saw my girl, she's hot. Possibly somewhere it's like, I got a dime. Maybe somebody was asking, I need some money for the bus. I got a dime. What if you mistranslated it? What if you thought it meant something completely different than what it actually meant? And so you went and told everybody a bunch of stuff that was a bunch of bullshit, and then realizing what that can do to different ones because of how certain ones want to translate wording. without ever actually having any context of what is actually happening. They don't look at the actual, scenario. They just make up whatever they want to in their brains and then go, well, what they meant was. Why would you say that's what they meant? Probably because you had no idea what they meant. That's usually what happens. When somebody says, well, what they meant was, what they mean is, it doesn't matter what they actually meant. I just want you to believe something and hopefully you'll listen to me instead of the person who was trying to tell you something in reality. And what's funny about it is how many different ones listen to the person who's saying what they meant was, instead of actually asking the person who said it in the first place, well, what did you mean? Because you should realize if somebody says, well, what they meant was, a lot of times what it means is, you shouldn't listen to me because I'm trying to pretend like I know something that the person that already told you what they meant, because I don't even really know what I'm saying, but hopefully you believe me. And if they said that, you'd probably ask the person who said whatever it was that was said, what did you mean? Because you'd be like, what a dumbass. Right? You wouldn't be going, oh, wow, well, obviously they know what the person was saying, so we'll listen to them. But when you realize how many different ones will listen to those going, well, what they meant was. And what's funny about it is some of those different ones that go, well, what they meant was, think it's funny that you listen to them because they view you as gullible and stupid. They think of you as almost like cattle. You're just a cow out in the field grazing. You ain't smart enough to figure out what you're doing. You just kind of follow the herd. And they laugh at it. And they think it's funny. Now, when different ones actually have a brain and actually think to ask the person who said what was actually said, what did you mean? It kind of scares them. Because then they're like, oh my God, they're actually smart. And they aren't listening to what I'm saying. And that's why they get scared. And that's why they lash out sometimes. Me, I get mad for different reasons. I get mad because of the fact that when some of them do that and it hurts those I care about, or if it hurts, someone that maybe I don't even know, but the person that got hurt thought that it was because of me, when it had nothing to do with me at all. And those are some of the reasons I get mad. I get mad at certain hypocrisy. When you realize the reasons I actually get mad, it isn't selfish reasons. So it's something where, for me personally, a lot of what I do with Snapchat, some of it, some are like, oh my God, that's like shocking. Oh, that's really pushing the envelope. Oh, that's inappropriate. For who? You want to explain why you think it's inappropriate? You ever watch TV? You ever watch any movies? You ever go to the theater and suddenly something happens on screen where it's like, what? Do you leave the theater? Do you say, oh my God, that's shocking, I gotta leave? Or sometimes you ever tell your friends, oh my God, you should go watch that movie. Guess what they did? And then you start realizing if you're saying that what I'm doing is shocking sometimes, probably it's because you're a hypocrite. Which is something that's difficult for some to fathom. It's once they start realizing that's why some get mad. They get mad when I point out their hypocrisy. But I'm going, look, a lot of what I'm doing, it's entertainment. It's artistic expression based on real life. And I'm telling you the truth. I ain't lying to you. I'm also trying to teach you how certain ones use wording to try and make stuff sound a certain way. So that you can listen and realize what they're actually trying to tell you. Realizing the difference between those who just speak normal English, those that speak double talk, when they're trying to fool you, trying to help you to think, to use your brain, trying to help you to educate yourselves. I ain't trying to hurt anybody. I'm at my house. I'm at home. If I really wanted to hurt somebody, you wouldn't have any idea where I was. Because I don't know if you realize it, but I actually have real survivalist skills. So if I really wanted to do something, I could just disappear and hurt all those I wanted to hurt. I'd be like non-existent, off the grid. That isn't really what I want to do. What I want to do is help, and I want to educate, and I want different ones to start thinking and start conversations. Because that is what can actually save America. Because, and it isn't just about America, but you got to start at home, right? And I'm an American. And there's certain stuff happening in other countries that is a direct result of some of the behavior that I was talking about. And when you realize it can affect the markets, it can affect family life, it can affect different ones getting jobs, it can affect education. When you realize how many different facets of life it actually affects. So I'm like, maybe if you think about it for a bit, maybe if you look at the big picture, you know, it's something that is taught at different places, right? About looking at the big picture. Where it's like, you know, they'll have something where it's like, you know, guess what that is, and they'll show one little portion of it. Difficult to tell for sure what it is, right? But when you look at the big picture, you realize that's just one small part of a bigger picture. And you have to look at the big picture to really realize what the reality is. Now, it doesn't mean that if you're looking at the big picture, you can't look at different parts of the picture, right? I mean, that's part of art, right? Especially certain art where there's like, you know, tons of stuff in a picture. If you were looking at certain, you know, paintings of like, you know, some of the great artists, if you know Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, you know some of their names at least, right? And that's kind of funny too. Because, you know, when you realize that, you know, there's a lot of other artists that aren't named, different ones are familiar with. And I could tell you a bunch of names and make myself sound really smart. Or I could say, you know what you might want to do is go to a museum and start looking at some paintings and do a little research. Find some of the art that you like. Find out about the artist. Look at the artist's name of certain pictures. Don't go in there looking for any specific artist. Go into a museum, go into an art gallery, and just look at the art. Find something that speaks to you that you're like, I like that. And when you find it, ask about the artist. Do a little research. Start looking at some of their other work. See how it compares to what it is that you really like. Because maybe that painting or art piece is a one-hit wonder for you. Maybe they were a great artist for that one piece that you really enjoyed, but the rest of it you're like, actually I don't enjoy any of the rest of their work. Or possibly it's something where you finally find the artist that you've been searching for. because all of their art is just amazing. And you're just like, oh my God, I love their art. But if I were to tell you any specific artists to look for, well, that might be my opinion. That would be what I personally like. And me personally, to tell the truth, I like tons of different art styles. And there's several artists that I actually enjoy for various reasons, including realism. And that's what I think is funny sometimes, is I have seen pictures that are photorealistic that certain, artist critics were like poo-pooing. Like, oh my God, it looks like a photograph. As if that's bad. I'm like, do you realize the artistic talent that was needed to make it look like a photograph? Because it wasn't. And it wasn't like it was just some printing. It was something where they literally painted a picture that was so detailed it looked photorealistic. And that requires talent. So I can appreciate realism. Photorealistic pictures could become a lost art if different ones don't realize why it needs to be appreciated. That doesn't mean I don't enjoy abstract art and other stuff like that where it's like, but you gotta think about it. There's certain pictures where it's like, what is it? Draw a square, a circle, and a triangle. And then they're like, oh my God, look at that. It speaks to me. Really, what is it saying? Because it's a square, a circle, and a triangle. That's it. Somebody gets a paintbrush and splatters paint onto a canvas. Oh my God, look at that. Yeah, they splattered paint onto a canvas. Wow. Guess what I can do? Well, there's a difference between those that splatter paint on a canvas and those who do it with talent. Sure there is. Art is in the perception of the one viewing it. If it speaks to you, great. I ain't gonna say something bad about the fact that some of that speaks to you. However, realize reality is that is something that almost anyone can do. But there's certain art pieces that actually require talent. There's, like I said, abstract art isn't necessarily just throwing some paint onto a canvas. When you realize what real abstract art is, and it's something that I can appreciate all forms of art, and sometimes throwing paint onto a canvas is artistic expression. So I ain't gonna say that it's never artistic expression, but you gotta realize what the artistic expression is sometimes. Believe it or not, I knew an artist who had a painting that was like that. I don't know if anyone else knows the story. I ain't going to mention any names or any of that, but I'll say that a painting that different ones are like, about, actually started out as a completely different painting. They got frustrated about it and just started throwing paint onto the canvas, and it's something that everyone's like, oh my God, it's such a, yeah. It was an expression of, I can't paint the stupid pictures. They can, if they buy that, then, oh, they're gonna buy it. Oh, I meant to do it. And it works, because in essence, it is an artistic expression. So I ain't gonna say something bad about it, other than it is kind of funny when you realize what certain ones have said, when the reality is it was just something that someone got mad about the fact they couldn't paint something in particular. And that's how that painting came about. So it's something where, like I said, if you start realizing the realities of life, and that is why I do what I do with Snapchat. And hopefully that helps explain some of that for you, for those of you who are wondering. And like I said, I'll be honest about it. And like I said, it isn't like all the girls that I send stuff to are really close friends, and some of them, it's just recent acquaintances, I guess you could call that. But doesn't mean we can't be friends. Doesn't mean that we'll never get together. It's just something where the reality is that, those that I know, I ain't going to say their names, and those that I don't know, I ain't going to say their names. Because that's part of what makes it artistic expression. Because as the girls realize what's happening, and I, am doing what I'm doing, and everyone's cool with it, except for a few idiots, then maybe those idiots should mind their own business or possibly ask some questions and get a conversation started. And then guess what might happen? Anyways, I hope that that helps answer some of those questions, and I'm looking forward to another good year.